I'm going to be performing at a small venue in Brooklyn on February 11th called Corzo. And this is one of a number of Brooklyn places that feature jazz one night a week. As people probably know, there's a burgeoning jazz scene in Brooklyn. I would say it's kind of the center for jazz in the world right now. And so this is a weekly series that's put on called Conceptions Jazz. And I'll be playing my compositions with a jazz quintet there. And I would say my music doesn't easily fall into any category. I call it jazz, but I love classical chamber music, I love Indian music, African music, American roots music, and I think you hear that in a lot of my work. Well, being pretty much rooted in the jazz tradition means that, of course, you are a composer-performer. And for me, that's a hard balance to achieve because I really have to practice my instrument every day, whether I like it or not. And I also have to continue to compose. And I enjoy both of them, but I find that given the demands of one over the other, that it's kind of hard to have a foot in both camps. So sometimes I really feel like writing and I'm really deep into a writing project and I have to kind of force myself to pick up the instrument. But sometimes I'm really into the instrument and it's hard to make time to compose. But I would say that that friction is part of what makes the music as well. And so to be able to do both these things still feels like a blessing, even if it's hard work, because I'm so invested physically in what I do as a jazz player. I'm writing not only for my collaborators, literally on stage, but I'm writing for myself, and I think that keeps the music very grounded. I do remember the first piece that I wrote that I was proud of, and I guess it would, well, maybe I'm being too hard on myself, but I think that it was probably not until late in my years in college when I finally wrote something that stood out, and that was a piece for 3 piano players that included a young Joan Tower, actually at Bard College, and a now deceased young student at the time, Bill Swindler, and the psychology teacher at Bard, who was an amazing piano player. And this was just one of these crazy ideas that I had that if I were to actually think about it today, I'd put aside because it's too logistically ridiculous. But in my younger years, I was not prone to such discretion. It's amazing when I hear about anybody using a pencil anymore to compose. It's nice. There's almost an age range that you can tell when people grew up by, whether they go straight to Sibelius or Finale or they still use a pencil. I sort of bridge the two. I write and then I go to the computer to kind of process the music and finish it. But for me, the most important thing for writing is I really do feel like it's an act of communion. It's an act of going inside and just being able to hear from a quiet space. And so I think that I need time day after day for even a small stretch of time to make anything happen. And for that reason, a lot of the best work I feel I've done in the past few years has been at artist colonies, where I'm able to actually absorb into the silence and really get something going that I can dream about and think about when I'm jogging and think about when I'm eating and there's no distractions. And I just think that's incredibly important to really get inside yourself. There are so many different ways to write for improvisers. One way, and the best known way, is to write a short theme and then have everybody communicate amongst themselves and take off from that theme. But also throughout history, but I think especially lately, there have been composers writing a lot of music for jazz ensembles where there's less improvisation and more writing. And I've been doing a lot more of that recently. So for instance, the large ensemble works I just created, it's probably 80% composed and 20% improvised. And I think that that balance between notation and improvisation is something that keeps changing depending on the piece, and it keeps changing over time as more and more people straddle the two worlds of jazz and classical.